Hello and welcome everyone to the live session. This is your host Vanshika. I'll take care of all your questions and queries if you have anything while the session is ongoing. In case you have any specific question for the speaker of the day, feel free to put it in the comments tab in the LinkedIn live section. I'll be taking up in the end and we'll have a Q&A with the speaker. So I'll be taking it through you to the speaker. And without further ado, let us introduce you guys to the distinguished speaker for the day, Mr. Ruban Fukin, who is the CEO and co-founder at Gujist. So, Ruben, welcome to the webinar.
Hey, thank you, Vanchika, and good morning, afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are attending. And thanks for attending the webinar. I know that we had some technical glitches in the past, so really appreciate your patience uh, with us. And thanks for joining the webinar. So let's get started. So today we wanted to cover one of the very important applications of AI, which is not being talked about as much today, is essentially on the aspect of partner enablement. And more so, it's relevant for the technology domain of companies who work with a large number of partners. So we wanted to address some of the key challenges and how to go about implementing a proper knowledge management solution, which is essentially what partner enablement essentially boils down to. So now, starting with why is this important, right? And we all are familiar with the numbers that partners drive business growth, right? And this is more so, like I was saying, in the technology domain, where almost like 70% of the IT spending, like in 2023, came to the partner channels, right? And we are all familiar with companies like Microsoft, where almost like 95% of their commercial sales comes through partners, and these are like $1 billion sales, right? And when we look at the indirect global trade flow, almost like 3/4 of that, right, 75% basically comes or flows indirectly through the partner ecosystem. So this is why it makes it so important to for businesses to focus on partnerships or strategic partnerships as a channel and enable the partners the right way, because it can drive huge growth potential for businesses. Now, when we look at what are the key for successful partner enablement, right? So it's basically three things: access to the right tools, access to right resources, and the right information, right? So all of those basically centers around knowledge management as the key to successful partnership, right? And right tools, meaning having the right software and platform, the technologies to help the partner maximize their productivity, right, and streamline their workflows better. When we talk about right resources, so basically it's about providing the relevant guides, right, the relevant tutorials and materials which are use case centric, right, so which are specifically useful for what the partner is working on. And having the right information at the right time is so much crucial to make the partnerships effective. Now, when we look at the knowledge management challenges, right? So, and we have talked to numerous companies, software companies, and their partners, and these are the key challenges that come that keeps repeating when in our conversations, right? The first and foremost that most partners struggle with is information overload, because companies have a lot of information, by the way. So it's the lack of information is never a challenge. It's almost always an overload of information where the partner gets kind of lost on the partner portal when they have too many things to process, right? And basically selecting what is most relevant for them, what is more useful uh, for the work that they are doing. The challenge from the company's perspective is to keep the content fresh, right? And this is specifically a bigger challenge for software companies because of the rate at which companies are releasing software today, right? So it's almost the release cycles have come down from what used to be yearly release down to like almost monthly releases at this point. So and it's not just about software upgradation. A lot of companies are releasing multiple different types of software for their partners. So making sure that the partner has the necessary information and the content is relevant and up to date for their needs is a big challenge. Um, the the third is getting use case centric support, because a lot of times the content that is created and offered are more generic to cater to a wider audience. But when it comes to individual partner requirement and what they need to know, so they look for content which is very specific to their use case, or when they need support, right? So while whether they are selling for a company, whether they're implementing solutions as professional services, right? So they need support which is very, very specific to their use case. And the final challenge is the inefficient knowledge retrieval, which is typically most of the traditional knowledge management systems or platforms have been primarily search driven. So you have a whole repository of information, and the way to access that information is through search. Increasingly, when we look at what partners need, is that partners don't need search results, right? They don't need links, which they have to then go and process individual links and figure out what they need. So more often than not, what partners need is answers, right? So uh, getting to the right answer when they are looking for a specific information, right, or they're looking for a solution, is again a huge challenge that we hear a lot of partners talk about. Um, so in terms of what are the personalized content needs, right, for partners? So the first and foremost is, of course, onboarding and learning the product, learning the software that they're working with, right? So the product related education becomes key. But the product related education has to be personalized to what each individual is working on, because otherwise it becomes too much of information. Because again, everybody today is hard pressed for time, they're working on multiple different things. So getting a lot of information which are not immediately relevant for them can become an issue, right? And then it basically boils down to the onboarding and learning becoming just an information source and not really a learning tool, right? So just to give an example, let's say if there is a partner that is working for financial services domain, right, and working with maybe banks in US, the kind of education or the content that they would need is going to be different from, let's say, a partner working with healthcare customers. Um, so, so all those nuances are important for the partner to get effectively on board. The second is basically partners who are selling for the company. They need ability to get get the right sales, get their sales pitch right, right, or get fill RFP responses. So this is a constant need where partners have to again revert back to the support team of organization, and increasingly becomes a scale issue if that is not being effectively supported. The third is that industry specific marketing content, because Again, the partner who is selling is also effectively marketing on behalf of the company. So they need to have the right collateral, right? Case studies that they can actually talk about, right? And then providing those materials, which is very relevant to them, again becomes a constant challenge. And finally, this is the biggest hurdle, which is the technical support, which can span anywhere from coming up with the right reference architecture based on the implementation that they are doing, um, coming up with the right installation guides, right? So basically taking everything into factor. What kind of implementation are they looking for? What kind of customers? What infrastructure that they would be using and things like that. So uh, even going down to the details of what kind of hardware sizing needs to happen, and what solution architecture needs to be created. And then once they start the implementation process, so troubleshooting resources, and when they run into an issue, how can they solve it, right? And most of this, the partners need the solution almost immediately, right? Because as they're working on it, if it takes like days and weeks to resolve some of that problem, so that brings down the efficiency level of the partner. So, so from the organization perspective, right? So this becomes a very expensive process, and as well as a time-consuming process when it comes to managing the right content and the right support for the partners. Because the content creation process, right, or the cost of creating content when it comes to creating personalized content and use case centric content required for every individual partners can become a very expensive value proposition. uh, the second is the cost of supporting a partner request, right? And we have worked across companies from mid-sized to large organization, and we have seen that on an average, the support cost can run as high as like $1,000 per support ticket raised, right? And resolved. And this is a very high cost, and this continues to grow as you have like more number of partners. Okay? And then the the downside effect of the cost is also because if the support team is not being able to scale because of the high cost, right? So it also becomes a time-consuming affair to resolve the tickets, right? Resolve the issues. So it can drag on for days and weeks, and which becomes a big problem. So all of this results in a human scale problem, right? And which is why most organizations are, I mean, they are able to only divide their partners into different buckets. So the top tier partners get high touch service uh, uh, because primarily it's a resource allocation issue, right? There are just so much of resource an organization can allocate for partners. So this causes also training disparities where again the top tier partners get the personalized training and the personalized content, whereas the long tail of the partners they get generalized content, right? Or they're sent to a general support portal or partner portal, um, and they need to figure it out themselves. Right? There is also a support imbalance quite naturally that the top tier partners gets higher preference and then the long tail when it comes to support, right? So all of this results in that self-fulfilling cycle that only the top tier partners who are getting that high touch support or the personalized support can effectively perform better for the company, but the whole long tail pretty much have to come up on their own, right? And it's a slow process. Now, here is what AI can solve, right? So AI is essentially good at solving human scale problems. So first and foremost is that AI can help deliver that personalized service that for the long tail itself, right? It may not be at the level of what a human support professional can offer to partners, but it can come closer, right? And the reason that it can do that is that one, essentially AI is a infinitely large knowledge system. So if it has access to the right content, if it has access to the past history of support ticket that has been raised or discussion forums, right, that has happened, it can process all those information and it can store all those information, and it's only limited by the infrastructure, right? So, in some way, it can also process knowledge. I mean, not in some way, but in a lot of ways, it can process knowledge even beyond human capacity. Right? It can consume information, and uh, it can store and retrieve information much faster than an individual can. The second is that it can intelligently personalize that information given a single source of content, right? It can actually generate very use case centric information or use case centric personalization from a single source. Uh, so, and it's able to do that at scale, it's able to do that at an incredible level of efficiency. And the AI can also simplify the accessibility, right? So, where it can translate complex piece of information into more digestible pieces based on the proficiency level of the end user. It can generate multimodal content from a single model content. That means that it can take text and generate audio or video or vice versa between all of those formats. And all of this happens at incredible speed, right? And the it can help organizations scale in a very cost effective way, right? So the incremental cost of doing this personalization is very, very negligible compared to what it would take otherwise to do that in a manual way. So, so it comes when we look at what exactly can AI do for partners, right? So on the needs of the partners or of the content needs, right? So the first is that it can create personalized learning path based on who the partner is, what the partner is working on, and based on what the existing knowledge base that is around, right? So what it does is that it basically dynamically adapts uh, the learning based on the partner who is working or the member in the partner organization, right? So if there is a new joinee in the partner organization who has very limited information, so the AI can generate very personalized learning path, which starts from the basics and goes into the complex requirement. Whereas for a more advanced user or an advanced professional in the partner org, it can generate more advanced content, right? Similarly, for technical users, it can generate different content. For business user, it can generate a different content. Again, using the same content repository as the base. Um, so with this, it can produce very tailor-made content based on what the needs are as well, right? So if someone is looking for help with filling up an RFP request, or someone is looking for a solution architecture, or someone is trying to understand the reference architecture of the system, right? Or they have troubleshooting needs where the AI can actually provide on-demand assistance, right? So this is almost having a support team member available 24 by 7 to answer questions almost instantly, right? And this doesn't need to be questions that are being previously asked, because if the AI has been given the right content access, the AI can deduce the answer from the content source, right? So typically what a support professional would do is refer different sources of information and take the context of the question that is being asked, right, or the support ticket that is being raised, and come up with an answer the AI can do that efficiently and help scale as well, right? And of course, there is always a fallback mechanism on a support professional if the AI is not able to generate the answer. So now, when it comes to all of this, right? So one of the common thing that we hear is that, yeah, of course, there are LLMs, and there's the whole concept of retrieval augmented generation, which probably a lot of us are familiar with by now, or at least we have heard about the RAG-based approach, right? That people, that the industry is talking about now. Is that the solution, right? Because there are a lot of vendors which are out there, so who also talk about that. Yeah, you connect the content, and then basically you search through the content, extract that information based on what the user is asking, and you pass it to the LLM. The LLM will summarize, right? Now, while this approach should sounds like it should work in theory, right? And we at Gujist also started with this approach when we started out, but we soon found that this is not effective unless you are doing like a general information lookup, right? So if you are looking up what is the best place to find for vacation, right? So all those simpler lookups, this approach works well. But when it comes to a product, or more so in the software world where software is very, very complex, it has several nuances, right? So this approach fails because there is no contextual depth, right? So to give an example, let's say if you ask about a particular software and how to install about it, right? So a lot of factors get into picture, and we'll show a simple example in the next slide. But if the contextual depth of what the version is, what kind of infrastructure it's being run on, if it is not available. So, LLMs are simply garbage in, garbage out kind of a system, right? So if what is being sent into the large language models, the LLMs, are not correct in the first place, so the answer that it will produce doesn't really work, right? So the second issue is on the incomplete knowledge coverage, right? So if when doing a search-based lookup, right, or information that is being passed, it doesn't cover all the aspects that is required to formulate an answer, the system will not be able to generate the answer, or more so the language models will just hallucinate. You'll try to come up with something, right? So which is not going to be correct. And finally, with the RAG-based approach, we see that there is, the application of knowledge becomes inconsistent, because if there are no clear rules that are defined, right? So the the answers that are being produced, right? So without the efficient guardrails or domain centricity, right? And if there are no relevance thresholds that are being assigned to the quality metrics, right? So it will apply those knowledge inconsistently. So at the end of it, the response that is being generated or produced may not be always accurate, right? Or even relevant for the user. So these are some of the limitations that we have seen with the vanilla RAG-based approach, right? So so here is an example of where the vanilla implementation of support automation fails, right? So in this, I've just taken an example of MongoDB just as a reference, but it doesn't matter, right? So it's more just just to provide a example here that we are using that as a reference. But so if I ask a question like, how do I optimize MongoDB performance, right? So with a vanilla RAG-based approach, the how it will work is that you just take this query, it's being converted into a vector equivalent, and then you do a search for this query across your content. You get the results and then you summarize the results. Right? Now, the challenge there is that most of the questions that partners raise, right, or end users raise, are not very verbose, and it doesn't have the context in it, because the context is in the mind of the end user, right? So when someone is asking this question, they have a lot more context in their mind, which is based on their use case that they are not sharing here, right? So trying to generate an answer automatically based on just this information, using a search and then summarize based approach, doesn't yield, right? So it might produce a very generic uh, answer, which is not effective for the user who is working on it, right? So, so what is required for an autonomous platform, right? And this is how even a support, a human support agent would behave as well, is that it needs to probe the partner or the end user for more context, right? So basically the context could be that what is the version of the software being used, right? What is the deployment architecture, hardware specifications, right? What kind of performance issue is being talked about, and things like that, right? So only then it give a solution which is more effective for the end user, right? So this brings the challenges that how do you build a system like this, right? So what should a system like this comprise of? So first and foremost, it needs to have a domain-centric knowledge graph, right? So what this means is that for the product, right, that we are offering support for to partners, it needs to know the complex concepts. It needs to know the relationship between the concepts. It needs to have information of what is an authoritative knowledge base, right? So all of those comprise on the knowledge graph, because without this information, the context of answering a question, right, cannot be done, right, in a vanilla way. The second piece is the intelligent understanding of the user's question, because like I was showing in the previous example, is that the user is not always verbose with what they're asking, right? So this has to be the system has to deduce the intent of the user, right? It has to apply the concepts that is stored in the knowledge graph to be able to map those concepts to the intent and have the right context, right? Again, going back to the MongoDB performance example, so again, depending on who the user is, right, the context changes in terms of what needs to be asked. So if it is a business user asking about optimization problems, so basically they are looking for more about the cost optimization of running an MongoDB setup in say a cloud environment, right? Whereas if it is a technical user asking the question, so more likely they are interested in how to do optimization of the MongoDB setup itself, right, or the infrastructure level optimization, um, the application level optimization. Um, the third is basically this is where the personalized proficiency mapping come into play, because um, unless that is being mapped as to who is asking the question um, uh, and in what context, the context cannot be derived, and an answer cannot be generated in an effective way. So the fourth piece is the dynamic information requirement mapping. So this basically identifies that do we have the right context, right? So has the user provide all the necessary information based on what we know about their proficiency and what they have asked, right? So identifying the gaps that needs to be then prompted uh, for the user for more information so that an effective answer can be generated. The fifth step in the process is that then once we have all those information, is boils down to the authoritative knowledge source selection, right? Is the answer likely to be in the product documentation, or is it available in a video presentation that was done, or maybe in the support ticket system, right? Or online discussion forum. So what is the credible source to really answer what the user is asking for, right? And then based on that, the targeted contextual retrieval needs to happen. Now, this comes back to the RAG step uh, that we are referring to earlier, is that in the RAG-based approach, because it's a retrieval augmented generation, right? So the generation piece in a RAG works only well if the retrieval is proper, right? And LLMs don't do retrieval, right? So the onus and retrieval is on a system that has to sit on top of uh, uh, the LLM layer, right? To ensure that the retrieval is targeted and contextual. Now, based on that, now an adaptive response generation can happen. The reason is adaptive is because a lot of time information may not be available in the content as is. It needs to be deduced, right? Sometimes it's as equivalent as performing some computation and coming up with an answer, or generating code as a response, or generating some architectural diagram as a response, right? So the response generation uh, has to match the core objective of what the user was looking for. And finally, there has to be a quality check on the response that is being produced to make sure that it's the information is current, relevant, accurate, and aligned with what the user's original intent, right? So when we look at all these aspects, right? So this is where it makes the uh, system so challenging, and it cannot be done in a very, very vanilla way. And that is where GoodGIS comes in, right? So we have spent like a good uh, 4 years of research into this spec, right? So before we formed the company, the team yeah, we are a team of serial entrepreneurs who have been working in the field of AI and machine learning for over like 20 years. Um, and we have created multiple AI companies in the past and in across different domains, right? So we understand, we have seen this problem firsthand. Uh, the whole idea of GoodGIS evolved out of our personal challenges as well, right? Um, so the way that the system is designed, it's designed ground up to solve this specific knowledge management challenges when it comes to partner enablement and specifically for the software world. Um, so what GoodGIS does is that it integrates into existing knowledge sources, right? It could be product documentation, training videos, LMS system that has been created, or other knowledge bases that exist, right? In terms of uh, documentations, in terms of like presentation files, right? Or it could be CRM or PRM systems or online forums, and it can also connect onto the open web as a fallback, uh, so that when it's generating a piece of content, whether it's a learning content or whether it's an answer to a question, right? It has ability to cross-reference this and build that right knowledge base, knowledge graph around it, right? To be able to produce right answer. So that basically becomes the core of how GoodGIS operates, is that the knowledge graph that we create is very, very sophisticated, where it can map complex relationship between concepts. And a simple example could be like, what are the features available in different versions of the software, right? So when a user is asking a question, so based on the version of the software that they are using, what is the appropriate answer? What has changed over versions, right? Um, what has changed over the infrastructure that a software is deployed onto, right? And how does it work? So it's able to generate all of those in a autonomous way. Uh, and then finally, we are able to deliver personalized enablement. So where based on individual partner needs, use cases and proficiency level, it can generate like learning paths and specific content and as well as answers. One of the key aspect of Bridges is that the quality control is a key focus area for us, right? Uh, we have set the right guardrails that is required to ensure that the content that is being generated is proper. It's not being by the LLM in a hallucinated way, as well as it learns from the continuous feedback with the user, right? Because sometimes even if the content is correct, right, it may not exactly match what the user needs, or it may not solve the problem, or basically there is a original content gap, right, for what partners need and what kind of content is actually available at an organization level. So it can identify all of those and provide feedback saying that, yeah, here is a knowledge gap that exists, right? And for which content needs to be produced, or original content needs to be produced, right? Or something has to be filled in. So it has the ability to all of that. So I just wanted to quickly touch upon a quick case study of a partner enablement use case that we worked with a Fortune 500 software company. So this company works in enterprise performance management software, which is largely implemented through partners. And their partners cater to multiple industries across the globe. So their challenges is essentially that the software is going through frequent technology updates, so which requires a constant training of and reskilling the partners, right, to keep them up to date. Now, this was not that big a problem a few years back when the release cycles were shorter, but now with much more frequent releases, it's a larger number of partner base that they have, right? So this was becoming a huge challenge for them. The second is the diverse customer use cases, is that they have partners catering to customers across different industries and geographies, right? So which needs to cater to the local compliance and regulatory requirements, or even like local languages and things like that. So this is another challenge for them to keep producing content in multilingual formats and things like that on a continuous basis. The third problem is that the whole support partner industry sees a lot of changes in person, right? So people leave organization, and when members of the partner team leaves the organization, and there are like new employees coming on board, so they need to be constantly updated, because a lot of knowledge churn happens that way, because if the knowledge was in the head of an individual, right? So once a person leaves the organization, the knowledge goes with them, right? So the ability to bring up a new professional to speed to replace someone who has been working on it and has that knowledge for a long time is also a challenge, right? And then their SLA needs requires quick resolution for implementation and support queries, right? So trying to manually address those challenges causes like longer onboarding time. There are like delayed issues resolution. Their training and retraining cost was going through the roof, and then eventually it causes like disengage partners. So on deploying Gudges, so they were able to decrease the onboarding time by like almost 45%. Um, and basically, this enables a faster go to market for the partners, right? Um, the the support cost they were able to reduce by almost 35%, because a lot of the answers that partners were asking, or support tickets that they are raising, the AI was able to handle, right? The only thing that which was new, which the AI was unable to handle, gets routed back to a partner support professional. And, and then with the platform, because it becomes almost like a self-service and personalized offering, so there was a dramatic improvement in partner engagement on the platform, and they saw like a 55% increase in the engagement level because of that. So coming back to Guj's unique advantages, other than what we talked about, is that we are a rapid deployment platform, right? So we have taken companies live in like 3 days to 3 weeks, um, based on the content sources that they have, right? That they're integrating. Uh, it's a seamless integration process where either it can be embedded in the partner portal, or it can be used as a standalone solution, uh, as like a partner portal, or we also have a API based approach for deep integration. Right? So if someone wants to integrate this into their solution itself, so we provide APIs to do that. And we have a very flexible usage-based pricing that scales on use and requirement. So with this, I'd like to thank all of you for attending the webinar, and I pass on to Vanshika for any questions that has been asked and to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ruben. It was really insightful knowing about all the facts and everything that you discussed. We don't have any comment from the users from the viewers right now, but I did had few prior questions that have come up from the attendees. If you allow, then I could just go on with the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So the first one would be like good just being an AI, and it generates content. So how do we ensure that it's always accurate and it's free from any sort of biases?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that is why, like I was mentioning, the vanilla RAG-based approach that I mean, it's being talked about so much, right? And it's getting so much attention in the industry, doesn't really work. So one of the unique things that we are doing is to basically build that knowledge graph upfront, right? So the knowledge graph becomes the source at which we basically validate everything that is being generated, right? To make sure that the answers are correct, there's nothing hallucinated. So, for example, the the large language models are not making up features that they don't exist, right? And then seeing that happen with a lot of the large language models, because if you straight away ask that question there, almost always we have seen it making up features, making up functionality that don't exist, or API parameters gets mismatched because they don't exist, and it's cooking up all of those information. So having the knowledge graph acts as a very strong safeguard, and we make sure that the answer that is generated is contextual, and we also make sure upfront that we ask all the right context that is required to produce the answer, right? So we are not assuming anything on behalf of the user.
Great, great, great. So we'll move on to the next question with that. Uh, so what are few of the specific features that could, contribute towards the reducing of the support costs and on towards the onboarding time?
Yeah. So a large part of, let me address the two questions, two parts separately. Let's
Yeah.
start with the support cost, right? Um, a lot of the support tickets that are raised are essentially repetitive information or requests for information, right? uh, or it is because that someone has not gone through the product manual, which is very common, right? Because in today's world, people are crunched for time, and nobody goes through the entire product documentation before applying it, right? So a lot of those tickets can be resolved by having just the knowledge of the product documentation or having the knowledge of the past support ticket, right? That has been raised. Um, so that is how Gurjist enables, and in the case study that I shared, that is how we were able to reduce it by 35%, because it cut down a lot of those repetitive requests, right? Because the AI was able to generate an answer which doesn't require a human intervention as such, right? Because these are very straightforward. Now, of course, there are certain scenarios where the requirement is very complex, right? Or it requires somebody with a domain expertise to review it and come up with the effective solution for it, right? So in those cases, it basically falls back on the domain expert or the support professional. But for most of the other things, which is generally like 80% of the support cases, right, are repetitive, and it can bring down that cost. The second is on the onboarding aspect, is that onboarding has to be, again, very specific to what the end user is looking for, right? And it goes to the same reason why people don't read product documentation cover to cover. Right? It's primarily because that not every piece of information there is relevant uh, for, and most of the software and products that we deal with today are very complex, right? They do a lot of things, and they do a lot of things for different use cases, right? So not everything is relevant for an individual. So when training is being offered, right, if the training is like weeks and months, and it goes through all the entire details of what, um, I mean, of every aspect of the product that is not required for the uh, individual, right? So what happens is that although the training is completed, when it comes to implementing those aspects, right? A lot of those information is not recalled effectively, right? Because there is this too much of information, and which is what the information overload issue that people face. Now, this again puts a burden on the support ticket, because if they are not able to recall some of those, right, or the relevant information, they would again raise a support ticket, right? So if the onboarding is effective, and at the time of onboarding, uh, the learning content that is being delivered is very specific to what is the use case that that individual is working on, right? Um, what is their proficiency level, right? And what is the exact job that they would be doing, right? So is this a person who is going to configure the software system, or is it the person to optimize and generate the solution requirements, right? Or is it the end user? Is it the user who is just going to use once the software has been set up or implemented? Um, so based on that, when the learning is provided, so the onboarding becomes a lot more effective, because the content is relevant for that individual, and they retain that.
Got it, got it. Thank you again for that answer. We will move on to the last question that I have. It's about partner enablement, and I think the entire webinar was upon that. So the question says, how does Goodgist handles the scalability challenges when dealing with large number of partners, and that too across different regions?
Yeah. So and this is a huge challenge that we see in the industry today, right? And I briefly talked about that. This is why most organizations end up um, segmenting their partners into, these are the top tier ones, these are the long tail, right? And the top tier ones gets high touch, so they have dedicated account managers. working with them. They have dedicated support resources available to them. Right? Now, of course, that becomes a costly affair for the organization, and it's not scalable, right? So, if you have like thousands of partners, you can only do that for the top like 5% or 10% of the partners, right? So the long tail is almost always left on their own, right? So they are offered generalized content on the partner portal, and even maintaining that content, right, becomes a challenge as the software is changing, or as partners sign up from different geographies or from different domain, right? Making sure that there are generalized content, even for across geographies, across domains, that takes care of all the local nuances is a huge challenge, right? And this is where AI can excel really, really well in helping scale that out for the long tail of partners, right? Because it can, again, like we've been talking about, it can generate personalized content. It can even connect onto the web to identify what are the local nuances, right? So what are things like what are the compliance requirements, what are the regulatory requirements across geographies, right? And even things like what are the cultural requirements and things like that, so that everything is factored in um, while offering the support to the partners there. Right? So this almost enables organization to give like a very high touch equivalent of a very high touch personalized service even to the long tail part, right? Now just imagine if all the long tail partners are also able to deliver at the level of the high at the top end, right? the the difference that it can make to the revenue of the company, right, and the growth of the company is extremely immense, right? And that is essentially the problem that we are trying to solve, is that we feel that the whole partner ecosystem, because most organizations have a very long tail of partners which are not effectively enabled, right? And enabling them can actually do wonders to the business.
Great, great. I think you are leading towards solving a really huge problem that most of us doesn't even know exists. So kudos to that. And thank you so much for a really insightful session, Ruben. It was a very insightful 1 hour. And I hope even the participants who had been connected with us throughout has felt the same thing. And thank you so much for each one of you also for being part of the webinar. We'll keep doing more of it. Till then, I think you guys could visit Goodgist, the website, and look over what all is happening, what all we are doing, and get a better understanding. You can even connect to Ruben, DM him on LinkedIn. Since he was the speaker for the webinar, you'll find his handle there in the live segment itself. In case you have any comments, anything, you can come back here and drop your comment anytime. Looking forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thanks, Vanchika, for hosting this.